chilling videos of the moment when former Prime Minister of Japan Shinzo Abe was shot at in the city of Nara. Videos on your screens show how Shinzo Abe was shot from behind with a shotgun while giving a speech at the campaign event in western Japan. Abe collapsed moments after the attacker shot him with his shirt smeared with blood. Abe was given CPR right after he fell on the ground after the horrific shooting. Visuals from the spot showed several ambulances and emergency response teams trying to rescue him. A 41-year-old man, Tetsuya Yamagami, a resident of Nara city, has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder for shooting at Shinzo Abe. Those are the visuals on your screens from earlier this morning in Nara city in Japan, in western Japan, where former Prime Minister of Japan Shinzo Abe was campaigning. He was shot at twice by a 41-year-old gunman who was arrested immediately from the spot. Shinzo Abe was airlifted and taken to hospital from Nara. He is being treated over there, but reports in fact suggest that he is in fact fighting for his life as we speak at the moment. The motive for this attempted murder is not known at the moment. The police are investigating and questioning the 41-year-old shooter, who has been identified as Tetsuya Yamagami, who hails from the city of Nara itself, where Shinzo Abe was in fact campaigning. Shinzo Abe has been the longest serving Prime Minister of Japan. He was campaigning over there. Also reports saying that Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida in fact was on his way to Tokyo immediately after hearing of the news. Christian Martini, journalist, is in fact currently en route to Nara. He is on board a train at the moment. We are joined by him at the moment. Sushant, Sareen, also defense expert, who is expected to join us as well. Christian, can you tell us what exactly are the details that have emerged so far as this attempted assassination of Shinzo Abe is concerned?
Well, we know that the perpetrator is a former GSI member, so he was in the self-defense forces, and the pieces are kind of starting. He was
reconnect with Christian. Christian, remember, is on board a train right now. He is on his way to Nara city, where this incident took place. He, of course, was giving us some of the details about the assailant, the shooter, who is currently in police custody. Those images on your screens of former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, who was shot at twice by the gunman, the 41-year-old gunman who in fact shot him from behind while the former Prime Minister was campaigning in Nara city, which is close to Kyoto in western Japan. This has obviously sent shockwaves not just across Japan but across the world itself. Shinzo Abe, a great friend of India as well. Relations between India and Japan in fact became much better under the leadership of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, former Prime Minister of Japan, and also Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Sushant, Sareen, of course, defense expert, is joining us this morning as well. Mr. Sareen, thank you so much for joining us on India Today. It's some very unfortunate news that's coming in from Japan. Shinzo Abe shot at by a gunman, a lone gunman, in Nara city. He's being treated at the moment in hospital. But in terms of, first of all, your first reaction, sir, to this news that's coming from Japan this morning?
Look, this is clearly very shocking news. Not only because Mr. Abe was one of the best friends India has ever had. Both he and Mr. Modi took the India-Japan relationship to new highs. We've always had a bit of a testy relationship in the past, but I think Mr. Abe and Mr. Modi changed that. So, in a manner of speaking, you know, it's a big blow for India today. And the fact that the Chinese, for example, are celebrating Mr. Abe's at least this assassination attempt.
Mr. Sareen, I'd request you to just hold your thought for a moment, because Christian Martini, who is on board to Nara City right now, a journalist, is back with us. Christian, you were telling us a little bit about the assailant who has been arrested by the police. Can you give us more details?
Yeah, just briefly, a couple of minutes. So he was a GSI from self-defense. So what does that mean is that it's the fact that he was carrying this what it looks like a self-made weapon. It actually goes well with this profile. So having been trained with weaponry in the GSI. Means he had definitely some familiarization with this type of weapons, because from what Twitter is coming out, it looks like a self-made weapon, and he made it look like cover as much as possible, probably trying to infiltrate on the crowd, posing as a journalist or as a photographer, and so what it looks like is that it was all one gunman, and he also apparently made his own weapon.
Okay, do we know anything about the motive behind this assassination attempt?
Not that we know now. Not that we know. There is no confirmation on that.
And where is he being held at the moment, Christian? Where is he being held? Is he in Nara City right now with the police?
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. I'm actually switching. Sorry.
Okay. So you're saying he's an ex-services personnel who, in fact, has been arrested by the police. Okay, we'll try and reconnect with Christian. Like I said, he's on the move right now. He was on board a train towards Nara City, where this very shocking incident took place earlier this morning in Japan. Mr. Sareen, thank you so much for staying with us, sir. You were, of course, telling us about how shocking this is and how much of a blow this is for India-Japan relations, sir.
Yes, it is, because Mr. Abe was not only a good friend of India, but he was also a very influential politician in Japan. Like you yourself said, he's been the longest serving Japanese Prime Minister. He was not a man, who would hide behind all kinds of political correctness. He was a person of very strong beliefs, and he was a bit of a go-getter. So yes, it's quite tragic what has happened. And the fact that, a common adversary of both India and Japan, China, seems to be celebrating. They call themselves an old civilization, but they behave like barbarians when an incident as tragic as this happens. And, throughout, if you look at the Chinese social media, all that is being aired, it is very clear that the Chinese are in a celebratory mood, which tells you a lot about not only China, but also about the strong stand which Mr. Abe has taken. He was a person who tried to break away from this kind of guilt-ridden politics which the Japanese had after the Second World War. He was not an apologist for what happened during the Second World War, but he was somebody who said that we need to move on. And clearly that was something which the Chinese, who were always trying to guilt trip the Japanese, did not take very nicely too. The Chinese also saw that people like Mr. Abe, who were making Japan a much more assertive country, was something which they feared could backfire on the Chinese. So I think that tells us a lot about the kind of man Mr. Abe is. I should talk in the present tense, because nothing has been officially declared so far. But the thing is that why he has been attacked, what is the reason behind it, is difficult to see at this point in time. It could be political, it could be just a madcap, trying to get his 15 minutes of fame. You have a lot of those instances happening around the world. It could be something like that, but I think for that we need to wait until the investigations in Japan are complete before saying something definitive.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Sareen, please stay on with us. Mr. Deepak Vohra, former diplomat, is also joining us this morning on India Today. Sir, thank you so much for speaking to India Today. Absolutely shocking news that's coming in earlier this morning from Nara city in Japan. Sir, your comments on the attempted assassination of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for this opportunity to be with you, learn from you on India Today, one of the best channels in the country. I've just heard what Mr. Sareen was saying. There's nothing that I can add to what he has said. His knowledge is far superior to mine. This report has shocked me, ma'am. You're being correct in terms of media ethics, saying that it has not yet been confirmed. I have a message, a WhatsApp message from a very dear friend in Japan. And what he knew the kind of respect I had for Mr. Abe, whom I had met a couple of times. He's just said, Ambassador Deepak, your friend is gone. Whatever that means. It's absolutely shocking. Padma Vibhushan Shinzo Abe, why him? And in Nara, which was Japan's first permanent capital, you can see that magnificent image of the 15-foot high golden Buddha behind me in the Todaiji temple in Nara. In fact, the Buddhist temples there had become so powerful that the capital was moved out of Nara. I don't want to go into India-Japan relations. Everybody knows about this. Any website will tell you about this. But this kind of political assassination in a country where it is very difficult to buy guns except for hunting, this is not normal. The last, I think, was, 65 years ago, 60-some years ago, when a fellow was assassinated during a live television debate. We saw it on television. He was attacked with a sword. Shinzo Abe was a pragmatic realist. And as Mr. Sareen said, so many of my friends have said this, Japanese friends, that the day we stop apologizing for Pearl Harbor and saying, oh, we are so sorry for what we did, the day we recover our self-esteem and our self-confidence, Japan will be back as a powerful member of the International Committee of Nations. It has the economic strength, there's no question. Because of its pacifist constitution, it is not allowed to develop an offensive military capability. Although I've had Japanese serve with me on UN peacekeeping missions in South Sudan. Shinzo Abe was challenging this logic and saying, look, I have Russia, I have China, I have North Korea, all of these fellows have their little nuclear things running around. Why shouldn't I talk about having a deterrent capability? Why do I have to hide under the American umbrella? A lot of people didn't like this. He spoke his mind. You know, he believed in the freedom of choice, and he believed in the choice of freedom. And what he did for India-Japan relations, everybody knows. I mean, we all know that we had the Maruti car come in, we had the Delhi metro, then we have the bullet train coming in, there's a whole Japanese city not far from the nation's capital. So many Japanese companies are involved. One thing that he said, which struck me a great deal, he's the person who first enunciated that Indo-Pacific concept while speaking to the Indian Parliament. I think it was 10 years or 15 years ago. He talked about it. One thing that impressed me very much which he spoke about, he said that Japan and India, the partnership is natural. He just wondered how we had not been much closer than we are. This is the kind of person he was. He was, as we say, a visionary, and his relationship with India's Prime Minister, who's also a visionary, in his own way.
Absolutely, sir. On that note, we'll just bring to our viewers the latest update that we're getting right now. Prime Minister Modi, in fact, has just tweeted about this incident, and he has said, and I quote over here, deeply distressed by the attack on my dear friend Abe Shinzo. Our thoughts and prayers are with him, his family, and the people of Japan. Prime Minister Modi there tweeting about this very shocking incident. Deeply distressed by the attack on my dear friend Abe Shinzo. Our thoughts and prayers are with him, his family, and the people of Japan. So that is what Prime Minister Modi has in fact said. Mr. Sareen, coming back to you right now. The Prime Minister, of course, they're tweeting and calling Shinzo Abe a dear friend, saying his thoughts and prayers are with him and his family and the people of Japan. Clearly just goes to show how these two leaders took the relations between India and Japan notches above what they were and where they stood earlier.
Look, absolutely. You know, with the Japanese, we've had a relationship for many years. But I think what Mr. Modi did was that he struck a personal rapport with Mr. Abe. And that was struck not after he became the Prime Minister, but much before that. And in fact, he had made a couple of visits to Japan, and that is when I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they both connected actually on the social media, and then they took it forward from there. After Mr. Modi became the Prime Minister and Mr. Abe became Prime Minister in Japan, it was like a perfect marriage, if you will, of both these leaders getting together and taking this bilateral relationship forward. Now, I suspect, there's again no written evidence, no statement as such, but given the kind of the kind of makeup of both these leaders, I think there was a kind of a connect between them, which was quite organic, in the sense that both Mr. Abe as well as Mr. Modi were people who took great pride in their heritage, in their culture, who took great pride in the past, and these were people who were not apologetic about it. So I think there was that connect as well between these two leaders, and that is what kind of the kind of disconnect, the friendship managed to take the relationship forward, even when there were certain obstacles which would come in between India.
本日午前中昼前ですが、奈良県において安倍晋三元総理が銃撃をされ、そして今現在深刻な状況にあると聞いております。今、懸命の救急措置が行われていると承知をしています。まずは安倍元総理がなんとか一命を取り留めていただくよう心から祈りたいと思っています。今回の犯行の背景についてはまだ十分把握できてはおりませんが、いずれにせよ民主主義の根幹である選挙が行われている中で起きた卑劣な
been attacked when he was making a speech showing no vital signs. Tell me the latest updates on the situation and your thoughts on this incident. First, today, shortly before noontime today, in Nara Prefecture, Abe Shinzo, former Prime Minister of Japan, has been attacked and is now in critical condition, as I have been informed. Currently, doctors are doing everything they can. At this moment, I am hoping and praying that former Prime Minister Abe will survive this. This heinous act, and in the background what the motives are, we don't know the detailed information yet, but elections are being held. This is the very foundation of democracy, and such an incident took place. It is barbaric and malicious, and it cannot be tolerated. We will do everything we can. I would like to use the most extreme words available to condemn this act. The government will anticipate every possible situation and take necessary responses. At this moment, doctors are working very hard to save Mr. Abe. So your question pertaining to the impact to the political situation, I believe it is not appropriate for me to address such a thing at this moment. I personally am not currently thinking about the political impact. I am currently looking at this very tough situation, and I'm hoping that everybody's doing everything they can to save Mr. Abe, and the government will do everything we can to be well prepared for any possible scenario. I think that's most important. This is the second question. Are there anything that's already decided for today's response you are going to be taking? You are returning your cabinet members, but what are your future course in the campaign? Well, from now on, we will have the cabinet members. They will all return to Tokyo. So once the cabinet members have convened, we will look at this incident, the current situation. We would share the information as well as the responses of the government and confirm everyone's role. Furthermore, in the elections and the schedules, there are no decisions made at this moment. But first, we have to have a good hold on what the reality is of now and take necessary responses. That's it.
So this is from NHK. After the cabinet members convened, what are you going to do? Well, first of all, we'll grasp the latest information, and as a government, we'll come up with what we should do. So first, we'll understand every situation, and then get cabinet members have a role to play. So according to the situation, we'll play out all the responsibilities. And first of all, everyone has to confirm the information and share the latest information, and government would come up with an adequate response to answer to every situation possible. I'm Kanehira. So this is a very shocking incident beyond words. So Prime Minister or the former Prime Minister was attacked and fell down. This cannot be tolerated. And we remember the incidents after the war related situations. So there are some concerns coming out. Like just before the war, and with this social situation, as a Prime Minister and as one individual, what do you have to say? Well, this incident, we have to understand about the suspects and the backgrounds, but we do not have the full information available. So we'll have to look into the police investigation, confirm every information available. So the question, so the social trend maybe have been changing, or speaking about this incident particularly, we do not have the full information, so I cannot give out the comments on that point as of now. So first we'll have to understand the background. That is very important. So what about the security situation? So he was the former Prime Minister. I think there were full security system in place. So do you have any comments on that? Well, of course, as for the security, people were doing their best. But we are now reviewing the situation on site, and that is also an important thing to understand. And another point. So this is a barbaric, malicious act that cannot be tolerated. And this is just 2 days before the election outcomes would come out. So in order to protect democracy, this incident had happened. So what do you want to comment on this? Well, as for that, I just told that this is the foundation of democracy, the election, but this barbaric act had actually taken place. So Japan, as a democratic nation, as a member of this great nation, many people of Japan have the same feeling with me that this cannot be totally tolerated.
And I would like to use the strongest words to criticize such an act. And that is what I intended to convey at this time.
You heard Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida there addressing the media at his residence in Tokyo. He, in fact, was campaigning himself. Remember, Japan has its upper house elections on Sunday, and that's why both leaders were out campaigning. Shinzo Abe was campaigning in Nara city, and the Prime Minister was also campaigning. He rushed back to Tokyo and addressed the media with the information that was available to him at the moment. He says that former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is in a critical condition, and the doctors are doing their best in order to, of course, treat him. At the moment, he, of course, suffered 2 gunshot injuries while he was campaigning in Nara, and Prime Minister Kishida says he hopes he is able to survive this. Sushant, Sareen and Mr. Deepak Vohra are in fact still with us live. Thank you so much for holding on to that. We of course heard from the Japanese Prime Minister, Mr. Kishida, of course giving us some of the information that is currently available with the Japanese authorities as to what exactly transpired. They are of course questioning the suspect as he is held in police custody at the moment. But of course we were talking about the relations between India and Japan, and Prime Minister Modi there of course tweeting in fact and saying that his thoughts and prayers are with the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and his family and his loved ones and the people of Japan at the moment. Mr. Vohra, coming back to you, you of course were describing the former Prime Minister, Mr. Abe, as a very pragmatic and very realistic leader as well. Could you sort of elaborate on that as to how exactly he, of course, took things forward as far as foreign relations were concerned, especially in terms of Japan-India relations, sir?
Well, thank you very much for permitting me to stay on your outstanding channel. He was a pragmatic realist, and he had a sense of the future. He knew what was happening. We all know that he was a prime mover of the quadrilateral security dialogue that we refer to as the Quad. It kind of lapsed into a certain level of inactivity when he was out of power. Then he came back and revived it. He reinvigorated the whole thing. He understood what the future is. He had talked about the seamless connectivity between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. He had spoken to the Indian Parliament about it and so on. Many of his policy ideas have endured beyond his tenure. They'll endure for a long time, especially that Japan should outgrow its reticence and its shame about the Second World War, about Pearl Harbor and all that. In his current capacity, he was vocal about the need for an even more assertive security policy. He used his bully pulpit approach to broach once taboo subjects, such as the possibility of Japan hosting American nuclear weapons or building its own, or Japan's role in a potential crisis around Taiwan. Not many people are aware that NATO has this possibility. Even if a country doesn't have its own nuclear weapons, Belgium doesn't, few others don't, they can host American nuclear bombs and their air forces will be able to use them. Now, to his supporters, Abe-san was the kind of person who boosted his country's global standing. He realized its national interest by harmonizing its legitimate ambitions with its clout as the world's 3rd largest economy. He was a conservative politician by instinct. He wanted to restore Japan's pride at home and abroad. There's another fellow who runs a country, terrible place not far from Japan, who thinks on the same lines. But Abe worked consistently to bolster his country's national identity and historical traditions without offending anyone else, without denigrating anyone else. Remember, ma'am, that he reaffirmed the position of the emperor in Japan's civic life, ushering in the new Reiwa era and helping notably to manage the transition to a new emperor following the abdication of Emperor Akihito in April 2019. He also said something in a speech, and I was very impressed. He said, look, we have all these historical narratives in our high school textbooks. They are very self-critical. Why? Let's get over this. All right, it happened 75 years ago. It should not have happened. It happened. So what? Do we, till the end of time, continue to labor under this feeling of guilt? Shouldn't we overcome it? What if the US is unable to provide us the kind of security umbrella that we need? Let's think of something else. And that explains not just the economic relationship that he developed with India, but also the growing, which we don't talk about, security relationship. We've been having these joint exercises and so on. Japan has the fourth most powerful navy in the world, the fourth largest certainly. I don't know if it's the most powerful. Ma'am, let me just say this. I have heard him speak. I've met him. Shinzo-san, before our eyes, our world is changing and a new international order is struggling to be born. Wherever you are, be happy, because for this new international order, you were the most effective midwife.
Right. Mr. Vohra and Mr. Sareen, please hold on to that line with us because we've got some information, of course, that's coming in about the gunman, in fact, who shot at former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, a 41-year-old, in fact, shot at Shinzo Abe, the former Prime Minister of Japan. The Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe collapsed while giving a speech in the city of Nara in western Japan after being shot at. The suspected shooter was nabbed and taken into custody for allegedly attempting murder. The police have revealed that the suspect is a 41-year-old. His name is Tetsuya Yamagami, a resident of Nara city in Japan. Tetsuya Yamagami is a former former member of Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force. It is known that police officials seized a shotgun at the site, which the suspect was apparently holding. Now, according to police sources, Abe, who is 67 years old, was shot at from behind with a shotgun. 2 shots were reportedly heard at the moment by those who were present at the site, including journalists who were covering that campaign speech. My colleague Geeta Mohan, our Foreign Affairs editor, is also joining us right now. Geeta, give us more details in terms of the investigation that is happening at the moment concerning the gunman who shot at former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
Well, the details are a little sketchy right now, what we're given to understand, Paulumi, and this comes right after the Japanese premier himself addressing the nation. So very important one. He rushed back from the place where he was also campaigning the upper house post-elections on the 10th. He rushed back and then addressed the nation because this is a very, very sensitive issue. And he's termed Shinzo Abe's condition critical. So we will stick to that till the time there is any other development. And we still wait for a medical bulletin. But it seems like the topmost leadership of the country has cleared the status of the former Premier Shinzo Abe in terms of health conditions. Having said that, when it comes to this individual, a man in his 40s, a part of the maritime forces, was a part of the maritime forces, quite well versed then with weaponry and weapons and how to use them. We do not have details, Paulumi, on how he accessed the weapon or what the motive was, but look at a few things and a few trends. One, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been absolutely intolerant to extreme communist ideology, extreme cults that were there in the past in Japan. They still exist, but not in the militantistic form that they were in the past. So absolute zero tolerance towards such groups, such ideologies. Not just him, most of the leadership of Japan have been that. Secondly, very, very staunch supporter of democracy and freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific, particularly the South China Sea and the waters around Japan, has taken a very strong stand against China, a leader who saw that coming way, way back and has been an architect of the Quad. The reason why he thought that democratic countries need to come together to fight aggression and autocracy in the region. And now we see celebrations on Chinese social media Weibo platform, which certainly is disturbing, but it also brings to fore the fact that there is great animosity and hostility between Japan, the Japanese leadership, particularly Shinzo Abe, and China. So we do not really know what the motive was. It would be really sad, and I've been saying this through the morning, Paulumi, that if the man who attacked Shinzo Abe is mentally unstable. Now that will be really unfortunate. Why? Because Japan is considered a country with very, very minuscule crime rate in terms of crimes in Japan. And therefore, the leaders of Japan do not really have a huge security detail, a blanket cover when they're moving around. This is not just to do with Shinzo Abe. There would have been a little more for Fumio Kishida, the Prime Minister, but nonetheless, not the kind that we see in other parts of the world, including the United States of America. He was there with a few people, few of his security detail, and was addressing a crowd in Nara city.
Right.
So, and also we are given to understand that the man, the suspect who has been apprehended, is from Nara city. So was it timed? Did they know? Was it pre-planned? We really do not know. We have to wait for authorities to divulge more details on whatever is coming out of the questioning of the suspect.
Right. Mr. Sareen, if I could come to you right now, in terms of what Geeta was, of course, mentioning about the sort of strong position that Japan had been taking against, of course, any sort of extreme communist ideology, was a strong votary for democracy as well. How would you, of course, describe Shinzo Abe?
Yeah, that's right. So I think, in a manner of speaking, he was one of those conservative leaders. He was a person, obviously, he was anti-communist. He was pro-democracy. Many of his detractors actually accused him of not being a Democrat simply because he believed in the old Japanese traditions, which do not necessarily go against the spirit of democracy. Very importantly, I think what Mr. Abe initiated, I'm not sure whether it happened during his time, was that the clause in the Japanese constitution that the Japanese army will not go to Japan, that was something which was also removed from the Japanese constitution. As a result, you've had the Japanese army go to Afghanistan, into other places as well. So I think Mr. Abe was somebody who understood that while Japan had become at one point of time the second largest economy of the world, currently the third largest economy in the world, if it was not going to play a political role on the world stage, then Japan would not be living up to its true potential. So he was not afraid of stepping out of the crease and saying, okay, fine, we are now going to play a role on the international stage. We are not going to be guilt-tripped by anybody else, especially the Chinese or the Koreans for that matter, or some of the other Southeast Asian countries. We are not going to be guilt-tripped by them going back 75 years and say that, okay, fine, we will stay, we will remain this island which has nothing to do with anybody else. So I think that was another major change which he brought about, which is why when Geeta talks about, Quad being one of the initiatives which he pushed for very vigorously, I think that is the reason why he was able to do that. And he was one of the big votaries of the Quad. So I think that is something which will remain one of his legacies.
So the Quad will remain one of his legacies. Mr. Vohra, I'd request you to come in on that as well. The Quad and the legacy that Mr. Sareen is, of course, speaking about. How do you, of course, see that?
There's no question about it. Shinzo Abe was the, I don't want to use the term ringmaster or bandmaster, whatever. He was one of the prime movers of Quad. He's the person who understood, ma'am, the threat comes not from wherever others might say. It comes from China. China is the elephant in the room, is the big bad bully next door. And Mr. Sareen a little while ago talked about what kind of civilization. Mr. Sareen, let me just say, repeat to you what the Mahatma had said when someone asked me asked him what he thought of Western civilization. He replied, I think it'll be a good idea. If the Chinese had any civilization, the world would be a better place. There is no question. The Quad has a very tough, military-oriented, not yet formally, interior and an exoskeleton around it that prioritizes the developmental agenda. So they're talking about vaccines, they're talking about new technologies, they're talking about economic recovery, free and open seas, climate change, etc. These are all areas that are existential challenges for our world today. And Abe-san understood this. That's why he was moving, about the supply chain resilience initiative, this, that, and the other, so that as the world moves away from China, the pain should be minimized, which is why those fellows in China are celebrating his demise. Yeah, I understand that they have this legacy of the Second World War, and prior to that, when Japan had invaded and occupied China. But to this day, ma'am, we are in the year 2022. There are over 100 films that are produced in China every year that denigrate Japan, and they show off those Chinese heroes who resisted Japanese occupation, how one Chinese could clobber 10,000 Japanese and so on. They still do that. They teach their children that if there's one country that you should learn to hate, it is Japan, because this is what they did to us. But he wanted to get over the past. He wanted to get over this guilt trip that every Japanese seems to be on, saying, look, it happened, guys, let's move ahead. That, I believe, will be his biggest legacy, will be his heritage to the world. That yes, we made a mistake, very good, but now let's move on. The new world is coming, and this will be a world of peace, of democracy, of freedom, when no one will seek to coerce the other.